technologies that are benefiting us as society today. As a strong, independent country that we have grown to become, we have expanded and revolutionized the way we function in communities and in which we handle business and crime. The internet is one of the greatest technologies that we have, and it helps benefit us in society. But if you peel back a few layers, you will find something quite unsettling, and this is called the dark web. Good afternoon, I'm Bianca Nazario.
I'm Alexis Robinson.
I'm Nathan Toro.
And I'm Brendan Gorman.
And today we will be looking at, to what extent is the U.S. government combating the drug trade within the dark web?
Now, to fully understand this topic, you must first understand the confusion between the deep web and the dark web. See, most people, when talking about the deep web and the dark web, fall under one of two categories. Category A.
What are these items?
And Category B.
What's the dark web? I've never heard of it.
Originally, I had fallen into Category A when before I did this research, but after I had done my research, I had concluded some very different things about the deep and the dark web. But to fully understand this, it is easy to visualize the internet as something similar to an iceberg. An iceberg has three main layers: the surface layer, a hidden layer, and then a layer that is intentionally way down that is almost impossible to reach. The surface layer is something you can easily access, and you don't need much effort to actually get anything on there. The hidden layer, you can see it, and you know it's there, and it may be a little bit harder to access, but you can still access it. While the deep down part of the iceberg is almost impossible to access with traditional methods. You have to use other adverse methods. Now, this is very similar to the internet with three layers: the surface, the deep web, and the dark web. The surface web includes anything that you can access with a search browser like Google, Bing, Yahoo, and even things like Instagram and Facebook. Now, under this, there's the dark web. And the dark web contains around 95 to 96% of the data on the internet. And while it's not inherently bad, you can actually access things like court records, academic journals, and things like items from your Dropbox account. Now, the part that actually gives the misnomer to the deep web is the hidden layer under it, the dark web. This is the inherently bad part of the internet, where you would expect to find things like illegal activities like hitman services, human and drug trafficking, and child pornography. And to access the dark web, you have to use a special browser called Tor. Now, Tor is the most notorious used browser to access the dark web because it is especially specialized in accessing dark web content. And while it can access deep web content, it is actually less efficient to use it than by using brute force human methods.
As you can see by this chart, the most popular item sold within the dark web is drugs, which come at 62%.
Here we have a chart showing drug trafficking offenses per drug. Powder cocaine takes up 24% of this chart, while crack cocaine, the crystallized, less pure form, takes up another 13%. That means overall, cocaine takes up 37% of overall drug trafficking offenses, which is about 1/3. A lot of people don't know exactly what cocaine is. Cocaine is a powerful stimulant drug derived from the coca plant, which is from South America and is outsourced from places such as Peru, Bolivia, and Colombia. The main distributor and processor of cocaine is the Colombian cartels. What they do is they'll take the leaves from these plants, they'll put them in large bins, fill them with gasoline, and after much more processing, what's left over is the pure form of cocaine. This cocaine is then packaged in mass quantities and sold for below street market prices, which is about 50 to 60 grams or about 25,000 per kilogram. It's then distributed all over the world and primarily the United States, where it can reach much more of a consumer base. Here's a picture of an avid cocaine user. He developed a condition known as nasal septum perforation, which is when a large fissure hole develops in the nasal cavity from prolonged cocaine use. This is one of the worst physical effects you can get, and one of the worst mental effects is psychosis, which is when the user would lose all touch with reality and eventually reach insanity. Here's a statistic from the Huffington Post showing just how much cocaine is brought to the U.S. per year. It's about 380,000 pounds per year, and an average of 149 lines of cocaine are used every single second in the United States. Along with doing cocaine, processing and distributing is a whole other offense, which is much more severe. The minimum for powder cocaine is probation. Crack cocaine is about 5 years, and then the maximum which can be charged is 10 years for powdered and then 17.5 years for the crystallized version.
sellers and buyers take precaution when it comes to buying items off of the dark web, so they use the currency of Bitcoin. Unlike a credit card, Bitcoin allows you to become anonymous, and you don't have to disclose information such as your name and your address. Also, like a credit card, once an account makes a purchase on an item such as cocaine, the account and the transaction disappears, which allows them to become anonymous from the government and doesn't allow them to get traced back. One of the most popular outlets in purchasing items off of the dark web is the Silk Road. What the Silk Road is an electric storefront that is used to purchase illegal items and service providers. They provide not only drugs, but guns, computer hackers, fake documents, and murder for hire. This is the largest outlet with $1.2 billion in sales and over 1 million customers. Fortunately, in 2012, the Silk Road was taken down and the developer Ross Wilhelm Ulbricht was arrested. However, most of the developers were not arrested, and they decided to rejoin the website and make the Silk Road 3.0, which is still rapidly running today.
So the Silk Road was shut down because evidence was left behind that led the government back to Ulbricht. Now, what about the other sites within the deep web that haven't left evidence behind? How can the government track them? Well, the United States Department of Defense has created an agency known as DARPA, which stands for Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. And they're responsible for creating new technology to be used by the US military and the federal government. But some of these technologies that they have created are used by normal people like you and I. For example, the cloud, GPS, and the internet were all created by DARPA. So what's ironic about this is they also created internet anonymity. And more recently, they've created a program known as Memex, which is a search browser that can find the identity of those who are anonymously using the dark web. So it is able to figure out who and from where these ads are being posted from. So as you can see here, for example, an ad was posted in this part of the country, and then say a few days later, another ad was posted by the same user, maybe on a different site, in another part of the country. Then a few days later, another ad, and it goes on and on. This allows the government to see the patterns that these dealers are using to understand how they're running their business, so that they can get more clues as to figure out the identity of these users. Now, Memex isn't perfect. It can only access the public information that is within the dark web. It cannot access the private information. So any online markets that contain, you have to use a username and password to access, Memex cannot find. Also, it is unable to find the sellers because of the use of Bitcoin, like Bianca earlier discussed. Now, another way that the government has come up with to find those who are buying the drugs is through undercover work. So the government will create fake ads for drugs, wait for a buyer to come and put in an order, then they get their postal address, and then they can refer back to see who this postal address is linked to.
So why does DARPA even care about drug trafficking? Because DARPA is mostly concerned with national security. Well, in an interview on CBS in 60 Minutes of Chris White, the creator of Memex, he had identified that Memex is actually used to identify human trafficking. And he identified that the people who were human trafficking were also the same exact people that would be drug trafficking. And those same people would be funding projects such as organizations that were national security threats, like terrorist organizations.
What are your questions?
All right, let's go through this. Brendan, we'll start with you. What points did you want to ensure were spoken about in the presentation, and why?
Well, I believe some of the points that we need to speak on were how certain drugs were getting to the marketplace, what the authorities were doing to crack down on the market, like Alexis said with DARPA and Memex, and then some of the points I made about cocaine and some of the awful effects it has on the users and how we need to get it off the streets and away from consumers.
All right. Alexis, you're next. Which parts of this presentation did you find the most challenging to defend, and why?
Well, I think the whole presentation, all of the information that we found was pretty confusing. my part, which was Memex, is applicable to finding these criminals, but it also has a lot of problems that we didn't address, such as it really only is a search engine, so you can't directly find the actual people. And as I said, the person who Memex can track the user and the location. Well, the user just means a user, the same user, not necessarily a specific identity that is attached to that user, which is like we can make any account for anyone. So I think that's another process that would have to be addressed if we were to further this.
Okay. Bianca, in what way did you improve your ability to work with a group as a result of this project?
I felt as a group we could have properly met up more in practice and be better prepared for our presentation, but I feel like we collaborated really well with our topics and we were able to help collaborate with the presentation and make sure it flowed correctly.
Thank you. Nathan, you're last. Last one. Nathan, describe how the content of the team presentation was changed as a result of the group discussions that you guys had.
Well, most of our problems arose from timing, as we originally, when we were first doing this presentation, we had thrown all of our information together and it came out to around 12, 13 minutes. So we had to cut out a bunch of information, like some that were repeated, and I ended up glancing over them in the first part of the presentation, because there was a part that would have taken around a minute or two to actually explain later in the presentation. And some of the things that we had to cut out were more in-depth explanations on exactly what other types of drugs can be used, sold and bought in the dark web, and what other types of services and the different types of browsers that you could use.
All right, thank you guys. We are done.